All right, our final notes lecture of the year here, and last week we did solving equations with variables on both sides of the equation, but that could also be called multi-step equations just because there are possibly a lot more than two steps that are involved in solving those equations. So typically after the two-step equations we just start calling them multi-step equations. But this week, finish things off, multi-step inequalities. So reminding ourselves about inequalities and how those are different than equations, and then how we graph the solution. So starting off with graphing inequalities and reviewing that. So remember, to graph an inequality, we're going to be placing a circle at the number that the variable is being compared to, and then if it happens to be either a less than or a greater than symbol, we use an open circle for those. And if it's a less than or equal to or a greater than or equal to, it's going to be a closed circle for those ones. Because in the or equal to situations, the number that we're comparing it to is a possible solution. So we want to show that to the reader by filling that circle in. If it's just a less than or a greater than, then the number it's being compared to is not actually part of the solution, and we're showing that by leaving it an open circle. Okay, and then we had if the mouth faces the variable, then we're going to shade to the right because we want to show all the numbers that are greater than the number it's being compared to. And if the mouth is facing towards the number, then we want to shade to the left. So kind of a shorthand way that we wrote that was if it's facing this way, then that's going to be shade right because it's facing towards the variable. If it's facing towards the number, then it's going to be shade left. Okay, so maybe that'll be helpful to some just to see it written that way instead of as a sentence. Okay, so graphing the following inequalities, just to review on that. So we have x is greater than or equal to -2 first, so I find -2 on the number line. In this case it's going to be a closed circle because of the or equal to, so make my closed circle. And then the mouth is facing towards the variable, which means that the numbers that we want to compare to -2 are all the numbers that are greater than or equal to it. So that means that my shading for this one is going to happen out to the right. Okay, the next one, 1 is less than x. So I find 1, it gets an open circle this time because no or equal to. And remember, it doesn't matter which side of the inequality sign that the symbol is, or that the variable is on, or which way that the symbol is pointing. What matters is whether it's the mouth is trying to eat the variable or the number. In this case, it's trying to eat the variable again, so this is going to also shade to the right. Okay, and then we have x is less than 0 as our last one, so at 0, open circle, and numbers that are less than 0 are to the left, and that's also being shown because the mouth is facing towards the number here. So on this one we would shade left. Okay, so just a little recap there on the shading and how to make the circles for graphing the inequalities. But now solving multi-step inequalities, so just like with the multi-step equations, same kind of start to things and same set of rules to begin with. We need to make sure we simplify each side, so if there's any distributive property or combining of like terms that needs to be taken care of, we have to do that first. Then move all of the variables to one side if necessary. So if we have variables on both sides of the equation, we need to move them all to one side. Remember, use an inverse operation of either addition or subtraction to make that happen. Okay, then we solve the resulting one or two step inequality, and remember to flip the sign if you multiply or divide by a negative. So remember, anytime that we make an inverse operation that has us multiplying or dividing both sides of the equation by a negative number, we have to flip the sign, so have it face the opposite direction. And then lastly, when it comes to an inequality, we always graph the solution. Okay, so number 1 down here, the example, we're solving the inequalities and then graphing their solutions. So here I have some distributive property that needs to be taken care of over here on this side first, so I'm going to distribute the -9. Everything else stays the same, so -329 is greater than -9 minus, because of the negative times a positive there, for 9 times 8k, which will make minus 72k. And then we have this other 8k that was being added on here, so we need to add that to the end. Okay, now I have like terms over here. The 2k terms would be like terms that I can combine. They're on the same side. So just circle those and combine them. Combining a negative and a positive, we're going to subtract and keep the sign the larger. So if I were to subtract these, I'm going to get negative 64 then. Okay, and now solve my, it would be a resulting two-step inequality here. So add 9 to the other side. We get negative 320 is equal to negative 64k. And then divide both sides by the negative 64. Remember, that means that it's going to cause, oops, not an equal sign in there. Symbol flip though. So if I take negative 320 and divide by negative 64, I get 5. Symbol flip, because dividing by the negative, and then is just k on the other side. So now, graph that. So going back up to the graph, I find 5. It's going to be an open circle at 5. Mouth is now facing towards the variable, so that would be shading to the right. Okay. Number 2, distributive property to take care of first. 171 is greater than or equal to 9 times 7 is 63, plus 9 times 3x is 27x. Variable's just on one side, so solve this two-step then. Inequality, subtract 63 from both sides. We get 108 greater than or equal to 27x. Divide both sides by 27. And it's going to be 4 this time. And so we get 4 is greater than or equal to x. No need to flip the symbol on that one because we just divided by a positive 27. So find 4. Give it a closed circle this time because of the or equal to. And then facing towards the number, so shading to the left. Okay. A couple more examples on the next page. This time where we have variables on both sides of the equation. So after we simplify, we're going to need to move those all to one side. So, but again, start with distributive property here. You're going to do negative 8 times 5, that's negative 40. Negative 8 times negative p is going to make that a positive now, 8p. Still greater than or equal to negative 26 plus p. Now variables are all in, not all on one side, they're on opposite sides, or two sides here. So move them all to one side. You have the option there, you could have subtracted 8p from both sides, or just subtract p from both sides to make that happen. Again, by just subtracting p, it's going to leave a positive coefficient. Might be a little easier to deal with, especially with these inequalities. So that's going to be the way I'm going to move it over. So then that'll be 7p is greater than or equal to negative 26. Now solve the two-step that remains. 7p greater than or equal to, and this time negative 26 plus 40. Subtract, keep the sign larger, so that should give me 14 there. And then divide by 7, dividing by a positive, so symbol stays facing the same way. And we end up with p is greater than or equal to 2. So that's going to be a closed circle at 2. And shading is going to happen to the right because it's facing towards the variable. Okay, one more here. So distribute. We get negative 36. 2 negatives make a positive here, and 6 times 9 is 54. X is less than negative 36 minus 3x. Again, variables on both sides, so I'm going to move them all to one side. I would again choose to keep it a positive coefficient, so add 3x to both sides here. Now move constant back over to the other side to solve the two-step. Here when I add 36 to negative 36 though, it's going to make a 0 there, which is fine, because that's just going to mean when I divide by 57 on both sides, I'm just going to get x is less than 0. So find 0, open circle, and it is facing towards the number, so that's going to be shading to the left. Okay, So hopefully that's just kind of an extension of last week for you, and just remembering how to flip the sign if we need to with the inequalities, and then also graph those inequalities as their solutions. Okay, worksheet comes out tomorrow, and then quiz is going to come out Wednesday of this week. So that way it gives you an extra day to get it completed by Friday, because all work needs to be turned in by Friday. So good luck with things.